The courtroom was silent as Pam Bondi stood before the judge. The air was thick with tension, the weight of the moment pressing down on everyone in the room. A few murmurs passed through the crowd, but they quickly faded as the judge, a stern-looking man with sharp eyes, cleared his throat and adjusted his glasses. "Ms. Bondi," he said, his voice calm but unwavering, "this court upholds the principles of neutrality and fairness. Your decision to wear a cross during these proceedings is a direct violation of our code. This is not a place for personal beliefs to interfere with the law." Pam Bondi met his gaze without flinching. "Your Honor, with all due respect, my faith does not interfere with my ability to practice law. It guides my principles, but it does not dictate my decisions." The judge exhaled, rubbing his temples. "Regardless of your personal beliefs, you were warned before about displaying religious symbols in this court. Yet here you stand, openly defying the rules." A hushed silence spread through the courtroom. Reporters scribbled frantically, cameras flashed, and the audience leaned forward, anticipating what would happen next. Bondi remained composed, her hands clasped in front of her, the small golden cross on her necklace glinting under the harsh courtroom lights. "Ms. Bondi, I have no choice but to fine you for this infraction. The law is clear," the judge declared. A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Some in the audience shook their heads in disbelief. Others whispered among themselves, their voices a mix of outrage and intrigue. Pam Bondi, however, did not react the way the judge expected. Instead of looking defeated, she smiled, a quiet, knowing smile. It was subtle but unmistakable, a hint of something deeper beneath the surface. "Your Honor," she said, her voice steady, "before you issue that fine, I'd like to submit an argument." The judge sighed. "Ms. Bondi, you are an experienced attorney, and I will allow you to make your case, but be aware, this is not a debate. My ruling is final." Pam nodded. "Understood, Your Honor, but I believe you'll find my argument compelling." She reached for a small folder resting on the table and pulled out a set of documents. As she placed them before the judge, a flicker of curiosity crossed his face. He adjusted his glasses and began reading. Silence stretched in the room, heavy with anticipation. The judge's brows furrowed as he turned the pages, his expression darkening with every paragraph. His fingers tapped absently against the bench, his mind visibly racing. Then something changed. The courtroom, which had been waiting for a swift conclusion, watched in stunned fascination as the judge's face slowly paled. His lips parted slightly, as if he wanted to speak but couldn't find the words. He looked up at Pam Bondi. "Where did you get these?" His voice had lost its earlier certainty. Pam tilted her head slightly. "Your Honor, those are precedents set by this very court. Decisions where religious expression was protected under the First Amendment. You see, I am not in violation of the law, you are." The audience stirred. Reporters leaned in closer. Even the bailiff, who had been standing at attention, seemed to stiffen with surprise. The judge hesitated. "That is a bold claim, Ms. Bondi." "Not a claim, Your Honor," she corrected him. "A fact. The Supreme Court has ruled multiple times that personal religious expression, when not disruptive, cannot be restricted by the government. I am well within my rights to wear this cross, and any attempt to penalize me for it is not only unconstitutional, but a direct violation of my civil liberties." The judge's jaw tightened. He glanced at the papers again, flipping through them with increasing urgency. The tension in the room grew unbearable. For the first time since the trial had begun, the power seemed to shift. It was no longer Pam Bondi who stood before judgment. It was the judge himself. Then, without warning, he sighed and set the papers down. His fingers drummed lightly against the bench before he leaned forward. "You were prepared for this," he murmured. Pam Bondi didn't answer immediately. She simply smiled, that same knowing smile that had unsettled him moments before. "Your Honor, I believe in the law. I respect the court. But more importantly, I know my rights." The judge studied her for a long time. The weight of the courtroom pressed down on him, waiting, expecting. He glanced at the bailiff, then at the attorneys seated nearby, all of whom were watching with unblinking intensity. Finally, he nodded. The fine is revoked. A collective exhale spread through the courtroom. The tension broke, giving way to murmurs of disbelief and admiration. Some clapped softly, while others simply shook their heads in amazement. But Pam Bondi wasn't finished. "Your Honor," she said, her voice unwavering, "I would also like to file a motion against this court's policy regarding religious expression. If we truly believe in justice, then we must ensure that no individual is forced to choose between their faith and their profession." The judge's expression darkened again, but this time there was no anger, only resignation. He knew he had lost. More importantly, he knew she was right. The gavel struck the bench, and the courtroom was dismissed, but the impact of that moment would last far beyond the walls of that room. As Pam Bondi gathered her documents, a reporter rushed up to her. "Ms. Bondi, did you know this was going to happen?" She turned, meeting the reporter's eager gaze. "I knew the law," she answered simply, "and I knew that truth always wins in the end." With that, she walked out of the courtroom, leaving behind a judge who had just learned a valuable lesson, and a nation that would soon be talking about the woman who had turned the law against those who tried to silence her. And yet, as she stepped outside into the blinding sunlight, she knew this was far from over. This was only the beginning. As Pam Bondi stepped outside the courthouse, the crisp afternoon air hit her like a wave of relief, but she knew better than to mistake the moment for victory. The battle had just begun. Reporters swarmed around her, microphones thrust forward, cameras rolling, questions flying at her from all directions. "Ms. Bondi, what do you plan to do next? Do you think this ruling will set a precedent? Are you worried about backlash from the legal community?" Pam held up a hand, signaling for silence. "One at a time," she said calmly. The reporters quieted slightly, leaning in, waiting for her words. "I believe today was an important moment," she said. "Not just for me, but for anyone who values their constitutional rights." What happened inside that courtroom wasn't just about a necklace. It was about the fundamental freedoms we are guaranteed as Americans. And I assure you, I will not stop here. I will continue to challenge any policies that infringe upon those rights, whether they come from the courts, the government, or anyone who believes they can dictate the personal beliefs of others. A murmur of excitement spread through the crowd. "Does that mean you're planning to file a formal lawsuit?" one reporter asked. Pam's smile was subtle but sharp. "You'll find out soon enough." With that, she turned and walked toward the black sedan waiting for her at the curb. As she slid inside, her phone buzzed. She glanced down. A text from an unknown number. "You just made a powerful enemy. Be careful." Her heartbeat quickened, but she kept her expression neutral. She had been in politics and law long enough to recognize a threat when she saw one. But threats didn't scare her. They only made her more determined. She locked her phone and exhaled slowly. "Drive," she told the driver. "We have work to do." The days that followed were a whirlwind. News stations across the country debated the courtroom incident. Some called her a hero, a defender of constitutional rights. Others accused her of grandstanding, using religion as a political weapon. But the most intriguing reaction came from the legal community itself. Pam received dozens of emails from attorneys, judges, even law students who had faced similar pushback for expressing their beliefs. Many shared their own stories of being pressured to conform, to hide their faith, to silence a part of themselves in the name of neutrality. She had struck a nerve. It wasn't just about her anymore. This was bigger than one court ruling. Then, late one evening, she got the call she had been expecting. A deep voice on the other end of the line. "Ms. Bondi, I assume you've been watching the news." "I have," she said, leaning back in her chair. "And I assume you didn't call just to discuss current events." The man chuckled, sharp as ever. "Listen, I represent a group of attorneys who believe your case could be the catalyst for something much larger. We're prepared to back you in a lawsuit against the court's policy. But be warned, this won't be an easy fight. Powerful people won't want you to win." Pam smiled. "I don't take cases because they're easy. I take them because they matter." Silence. Then, the voice on the other end said, "Good. Expect a formal proposal within the next 48 hours." The line went dead. Pam set the phone down, her mind already racing. She knew this lawsuit would put her in the crosshairs of people who didn't like their authority being questioned. Judges, lawmakers, corporate donors. This battle would expose those who thrived in the gray areas of the law, the ones who manipulated policy to fit their own agendas. And she was ready for them. 2 weeks later, the lawsuit was officially filed. The response was immediate. News anchors dissected every aspect of the case. Legal analysts debated her chances. Social media exploded with arguments both for and against her stance. But then came the real pushback. One evening, as she was leaving her office, she noticed a black SUV parked across the street. It had been there for hours. When she started walking toward her car, the SUV's headlights flicked on. It didn't move, just sat there, watching. Her grip on her keys tightened. The next day, an envelope arrived at her office. No return address. Inside was a single piece of paper. Drop the case. Last warning. She let out a slow breath. Fear was a natural reaction, but she wouldn't let it dictate her next move. Instead of backing down, she doubled down. She called a press conference. Cameras clicked as she stepped to the podium, her voice unwavering. "I want to make one thing very clear," she said, looking directly into the lens. "I will not be intimidated. I will not be silenced. This is about more than me. This is about the right of every American to express their beliefs without fear. And I will fight for that right until the very end." The statement sent shockwaves through the legal world. If anyone thought she would back down, they were sorely mistaken. But the fight was only just beginning. Months passed, and the case moved forward. The opposition was fierce, top-tier attorneys, powerful political figures, even former allies who urged her to reconsider. One night, as she was reviewing court documents, her phone rang. An unfamiliar number. She hesitated, then answered. "You think you've won, don't you?" The voice was distorted, masked by some kind of scrambling device. "You have no idea what you're up against." Pam didn't flinch. "And you have no idea who you're dealing with." Silence. Then a low chuckle. "We'll see about that." The line went dead. She sat back, exhaling slowly. The threats were escalating, but so was her resolve. She knew what she had to do. She called her legal team. "We're pushing forward. No delays, no deals. We see this through to the end." The battle lines were drawn. The courtroom showdown that would change everything was fast approaching. And Pam Bondi was ready. The morning of the final hearing arrived with an eerie stillness. The sky outside was gray overcast, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. Pam Bondi sat at her desk, flipping through pages of her legal arguments one last time. Every detail had been scrutinized, every counterpoint anticipated. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Her phone buzzed. A message. "Be careful today. It won't go as planned." She stared at the words, a slow chill creeping up her spine. This wasn't a vague threat, it was a warning. Pam took a deep breath. No distractions. No fear. Whoever was behind these messages wanted her rattled, uncertain. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction. She grabbed her briefcase and stepped out onto the sidewalk, where her driver was waiting. The moment she settled into the back seat, she noticed something strange. A different car. Her usual driver, Marcus, was nowhere to be seen. Instead, a younger man sat behind the wheel, his expression unreadable. Pam's instincts flared. "Where's Marcus?" The driver hesitated. "He had an emergency this morning. I was assigned to you, instead." Something wasn't right. Pam nodded slowly, but didn't fasten her seatbelt. Instead, she reached for her phone, discreetly tapping out a message to her assistant. "Something's wrong. Track this car." The driver pulled away from a curb. At first, the route seemed normal, but as they reached an intersection, he veered left, away from a courthouse. Pam's fingers tightened around her phone. This isn't the right way. The driver's jaw tensed. He didn't answer. Adrenaline flooded her system. She glanced at the door handle. Locked. She reached into her bag, gripping the pepper spray she always carried. The driver glanced at her through the rearview mirror, eyes calculating. "You should drop the case, Ms. Bondi. For your own good." Pam's heartbeat pounded in her ears. She didn't hesitate. With one swift motion, she aimed the pepper spray and released a direct stream into his face. The driver howled, the car swerving wildly. Tires screeched. Pam braced herself as the vehicle slammed into a street lamp, the impact jolting her forward. Ignoring the pain shooting through her shoulder, she fumbled with the door handle. This time it opened. She stumbled out, gasping for air. A few bystanders rushed over, shouting, asking if she was okay. Pam turned back to the car. The driver was slumped over, groaning in pain. His face was red, his eyes squeezed shut. Sirens wailed in the distance. Her assistant's name flashed on her phone screen. Pam. I tracked the car. Are you okay? She exhaled sharply. I'm fine. Call the police. We need to find out who sent him. By the time she arrived at the courthouse, the tension in the air was palpable. Word had spread about the attempted abduction. Reporters were buzzing outside, cameras clicking wildly as she stepped out of a different car, flanked by security. Pam kept her face composed. They wanted her scared. They wanted her to back down. She wouldn't. As she entered the courtroom, she felt every gaze shift toward her. The opposing attorneys looked smug, but there was something else beneath the surface: uncertainty. They knew she wouldn't be easily intimidated. The judge entered, a heavy silence settling over the room. Pam glanced at him, searching for any sign of bias, any hint of the forces working behind the scenes. He cleared his throat. Let's begin. The arguments unfolded like a chess match, each move calculated, each rebuttal met with equal force. Pam presented her case with precision, her words unwavering. This isn't just about a single incident. It's about a system that punishes individuals for expressing their beliefs. If we allow this ruling to stand, we set a precedent that the government can dictate personal expression under the guise of neutrality. That is not what the Constitution stands for. The opposing counsel smirked. Ms. Bondi, you're making this far more dramatic than it is. The court simply enforces a standard of professionalism. Your client was fined for wearing a cross. Pam cut in sharply. Not for misconduct, not for disrupting proceedings, but for an article of faith. If this court allows that, where does it end? The judge tapped his gavel lightly. Let's stay focused on the legal merits. Pam leaned forward. The legal merit is simple, Your Honor. The First Amendment guarantees freedom of expression. If a judge has the right to fine someone for wearing a religious symbol, then they have the right to fine anyone for any personal expression they find disagreeable. And that is a dangerous precedent. Murmurs spread through the room. The judge leaned back, steepling his fingers. Understood. The court will take all arguments under advisement and issue a ruling soon. Pam exhaled slowly. The battle wasn't over yet. That night, she returned home exhausted but wired, her mind racing with every possible outcome. Her phone buzzed again. An unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. A distorted voice. You're making a mistake, Pam. She gritted her teeth. And you're running out of ways to scare me. A pause. Then the voice chuckled. We'll see. The line went dead. Pam stared at the phone, her jaw tight. She wasn't just fighting a legal case anymore. She was fighting something bigger, something shadowy, hidden beneath layers of bureaucracy and influence. But they had underestimated her. She wasn't backing down. And she wasn't alone. Because this wasn't just about a cross. It was about freedom. And she was ready to fight for it. Pam sat in silence, staring at her phone. The call had lasted only a few seconds, but the weight of it pressed heavily against her chest. Whoever was behind this wasn't just trying to intimidate her. They were confident. Confident that no matter what she did, no matter how strong her case was, they would find a way to silence her. She set the phone down and leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes for a moment. A part of her, the rational part, told her to report the call to the authorities. But another part, the part honed by years of legal battles and political warfare, told her that this wasn't just a simple threat. This was a message. They wanted her to know they were watching. And that meant she was getting close to something. She opened her laptop and scrolled through her files, her mind racing. She needed to find the missing link, the one thing that tied everything together. The judge's ruling against her client had been swift, too swift. The so-called professionalism policy had never been enforced this strictly before. Why now? She started digging. Emails, court transcripts, past rulings. She combed through every detail, looking for inconsistencies, connections. Hours passed, the glow of the screen burning into her eyes. And then, she found it. A single document buried deep in the records. A previous case from 5 years ago, eerily similar to her client's. A teacher had been reprimanded for wearing a religious pendant. A case dismissed on a technicality before it ever reached trial. But it wasn't the case itself that caught Pam's attention. It was the judge who had dismissed it. Judge Alan Mortensen, the same judge presiding over her case. Her pulse quickened. This wasn't just a matter of judicial bias. This was something deeper. Mortensen had been involved in a case like this before, but back then, he had ruled differently. Why the sudden shift? What had changed? She checked his financial records, political donations, anything that might explain his behavior. And then she saw it. A large deposit into an unregistered fund. A week before her case began, Pam's stomach twisted. Someone had paid him off. She sat back, exhaling sharply. This wasn't just about her client anymore. This was corruption, plain and simple. And now she had proof. The next morning, Pam walked into the courthouse, her expression unreadable. The hearing was set to continue, but she had no intention of letting it play out as expected. As soon as she took her seat, she felt the judge's eyes on her. He looked calm, in control, as if he had already decided the outcome. She waited until the court was in session. Then she stood. "Your Honor," she said, her voice clear and steady. "Before we proceed, I have new evidence to submit." The judge raised an eyebrow. "This is highly irregular." Pam stepped forward. "So is accepting bribes to influence a case." A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. The judge's face turned pale. "Excuse me," he said, his voice suddenly sharp. Pam held up a stack of documents. "I have financial records, transaction logs, and a trail leading directly to an unregistered account that received a large sum just before this trial began. An account tied to you, Judge Mortensen." The room erupted into murmurs. The judge slammed his gavel down. "This is outrageous. I will not allow." Pam cut him off. "Your Honor, I'm formally requesting an investigation into judicial misconduct." The judge opened his mouth, then closed it. A thin bead of sweat formed on his forehead. "This court will take a recess," he announced hastily, rising to his feet. Effective immediately. He turned and disappeared into his chambers. Pam watched him go, her heart pounding. She had expected resistance. She had expected outrage. But she hadn't expected fear. And that meant one thing. She was right. That evening, Pam sat in her office, flipping through news channels. The scandal had already broken. The media was running with the story, dissecting every detail of the bribery allegations. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. This time, the voice wasn't distorted. A man's voice. Calm. Measured. "You've made a lot of enemies today, Pam." She gripped the phone. "So have you." A small chuckle. "You think you've won?" Pam exhaled slowly. "No. But I've started something you can't stop." Silence. Then, the line went dead. Pam put the phone down and looked out the window. The city lights stretched endlessly before her, a reminder that justice was never easy, never straightforward. But she wasn't done. Not by a long shot.